Steve here. Welcome to part two of continuing to digitize this project using an original score from the late 1800s on the song Lorena. Well, let's have a look here. Let me quit this. Okay, so here we are. We've already done the first few stanzas, and now we're moving into the third system. I left this at part two because this actually brings out a number of more complicated issues with respect to digitizing music that was written at the turn of the century. So looking up here to the original score, you can see that in the right hand, they bring the right hand down into the bass clef. And as you all know, that is not a common way of notating music for piano today. It certainly can be done, but it's not as common otherwise. But the issue becomes one of how then this music or this line is then translated or interpreted by SmartScore. So let's have a look here. Well, first let's clean up the melody line. And we can see here that we have a dot. So as we talked about before, we go ahead and left click. Oh, sorry, you need to go back and use escape to get back to the properties. Click on it, add a dot. And we can see here, see a dot. Oh, that needs a dot too. So we'll add a dot by clicking and adding a dot on properties. Now this one's fine. This looks okay, except we seem to have the double slur missing those grace notes. So let's go ahead, click X on the keyboard to delete the slurs. Let's go ahead and add the grace notes. Once again, let's activate the symbol selection over here on the left. You can move it, of course. But let's go ahead and add our grace notes. And we do that in a couple of different ways. But for this purposes, let's click on Notes. Let's click on 16th notes, grace notes, and go ahead and add them in, being careful to not overlap any of the existing notes. B, A, and F sharp. And if we want to add the slurs, we can go to Tool Search, click Legato. Remember, in SmartScore, legato is a slur. We'll slur those notes, and then we'll slur those notes. And let's go ahead and select the two grace notes by selecting O on the keyboard as our selecting, and then pressing B on the keyboard to give them a beam. And oh, by the way, let's go back and check under Tools, and let's make sure that our auto spacing is selected and our auto beaming is selected. Okay? Back to the note editor, make sure that the escape is clicked. Now let's go on to this measure. Oh, we can see that we're missing another dotted note. So we can do it. I'm going to press D, give it a dot. This B has to be dotted. Now remember, we can do this either by the keyboard shortcut that I used called D, or I could have left clicked on it, properties, like I did earlier. Okay, now notice that we're missing an eighth note. So we need to add an eighth note between those two notes. So we're going to enter the Command key on a Mac, left click on the eighth note to pick up the eighth note, and then add it between the notes. There we go. And now we have a completed measure, no longer in yellow, with all of the necessary notes in place. Okay, on to the third note. We need to put a dot here. So I'll do it the other way, right? As I'll go ahead, left click, add a dot. And we can see that I need an E here, so we need to get rid of one of these. So I'll hit X, get rid of one of the eighth rests, click eighth note up here. I could use a keyboard shortcut as well, add the E, and now all of these are have turned white. So let's go into the piano score. So we can see what's happened here is that there has been some confusion because this line in the original document was off, so it made a quarter note there, which isn't true. And it appears as if these notes are in the bass clef, but that might not be. And particularly might not be when it is actually exported as an XML file. So what I have learned over time is it's best to simply rewrite these sorts of passages. So what I can do is hit O on the keyboard, which is our select tool, select everything in the upper staff, and you can see everything turn yellow that is in the treble clef staff. I've let go of the mouse since they're still yellow, and I'll delete. And we can see that there's an extra note here, so I'll click X, make it yellow, delete it. So now we've got, oh, and there's an extra one here. So click X, select, and click on it. Okay, so now it appears as if our bass clef line is correct. Now, if we're going to add these notes in, we could, of course, make a decision to write these in the bass clef. But as I said, that's not usually how it's done in today's world. So let's go ahead, and if we had a MIDI keyboard, we could simply record the MIDI keyboard and add them in. But as this is an exercise in using the software itself, not a MIDI keyboard, let's go ahead and manually enter them in. So let's go ahead and, for sake of brevity, let's simply add first the eighth note rests. Now you can add the eighth notes rests directly from the rests here, or you can add them from here, over here on the left side. So let's have an eighth rest. So we're going to have 2 eighth rests in each measure. One there. Now, the program will automatically space them out, but if you want to move them, we can. And how do we move these rests over? We position our mouse, we'll hit escape, position our mouse over the measure, press shift, and just drag them over so we have room to put in our other notes. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put in our notes. And they're eighth notes, so we can either select notes, eighth notes, we can select it over here on the left, or we can hit the number 4. Hitting the number 4 in this program makes an eighth note. So we'll draw these, in fact, in the treble clef, since that would be, I think, how most of us would do it. So we've got an E, so let's go ahead and put in an E. Then we have a C. Now notice here, we've got to be careful. We can't put it there where it's green, because that would put, if it's green above that, it will put it in the second voice. So we have to put it so none of the other elements are colored. C, back down to E. E, C, E. We can keep going. That's an F, D, F. Whoops. See, I got them too close to each other. So it actually made it a separate voice. I'll hit Control Z to undo it. And I'll make sure now that I don't have it highlighted. F, D, F, E, D, E, E, D, E, E, C, E. And then we'll add there a half rest. And we can go to the rests, pick a half rest, and put it in. Okay, so now we need to add, though, we need to add the chord notes that are occurring here. The way you add a chord note is by pressing the corresponding note duration, which in this case is an eighth note. Once again, on the left side, on the right side, or simply by pressing the number 4, we go to add the chord note. Now, what happens here is if we just put our note on this, we will change that orange, because orange affects that note. We will simply change the note. If we move it and it becomes green and we press, we will actually put it into the second voice. Orange means replace. Green means add to second voice. So how do you make a chord? And that's where pressing the keyboard Z. So keyboard Z, you'll see that it becomes 2 notes. That's how you introduce a chord. So go ahead and make the C orange, which means it's going to be in the same rhythmic spot. Move down to an A. And there we've got it. C to A, D to A, D to A, D to B and G, D to B and G, and there we go. We have now taken this line and put it into what most of us would consider to be standard. Now, if we wanted to beam all of these together, because like it is here, the default with auto beaming is to cluster them. So if you wanted to beam them all together, you could simply use the O, press O, select, and then beam them together with B. Wonder what happens if I do them all at the same time. See, that didn't work. It beamed everything together. Went over the breasts. So beam, beam, select, whoops, select, and beam. So there we go. We've now created, we've recreated this music in a way that is more consistent with how we do music in today's world. But as I said, we could have put this in the left hand, but as you all know, as piano players, we are used to things being in the bass clef that we play with our left hand, and we're used to things in the right hand being played in the treble clef. Okay. So here, what we could do is simply, we could redo exactly what we've done, or we could copy and paste if they are in fact similar structures. So we can see here this pattern. That's a little different, isn't it? Yes. Well, yeah, it's a little different. But let's go ahead and see if we can make it simpler. First, let's fix this one. Add a dot, add a dot. Once again, I'm just left clicking for properties and adding the dot. We need, let's go ahead and take out these disconnected with it. Once again, X to delete, X on the keyboard. Now we need to add a quarter note, and we can do that by either pressing 3, numeral 3, or selecting it, or picking it up with control click. There we go. And here we need a dot here. I hit escape to get out, add a dot. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press O, which is our select tool. I'm going to take everything that's in the treble clef line and make it go away. Okay? Now, having done that, you'll notice what's happened is it reset the voicing in the bottom, so there's no longer colors. So these are all now in voice 1. So let's go up here. Let's go back. Use our select tool. Control copy to paste. Go back here. Control V, which then brings up the icon of the clipboard. Bring it to the center. Merge with existing bars, right? Because we're placing it over existing bars. And now let's see if they're any different. E, C, A, E, that's right. That's right. That's correct. I'm just comparing what I've pasted. Oh, this is different. So let's say, so this is different. Okay, these two bars are different. So how do we fix that? Well, we have an E. We want to change some of these notes. Well, we want to take away the low G. So how do we do that? We click X on the keyboard, but if we X, we take them all away. Remember, we made a chord by pressing Z. Let's press Z again. Now with the X pressed first, then the Z, you see that it's hatched? We can select the chord note we want to remove and remove the chord note. Now the chord note is there, and we need to add one here, but okay. So now escape to get out, and let's just change these notes. Well, how do you change these notes? You can't just pick and grab in SmartScore. What you have to do is put your mouse in the bar, press Shift, and then physically grab the note and change it. So this B is going to go to A, this D is going to go to C. And that's how it's done. And there you go. We've now, using cut and paste and some mild changes, have created a replication. Okay. And basically then we would go through and continue to do these things throughout the course of the piece. So I think I'm going to call this one done as far as I need to, because I think you all have the idea about now how you can apply this going forward. So for example, in this passage here, I would probably do the same thing. I would remove all of these and repeat them. I would probably do that first, copy, paste, and then do copying and pasting and making some changes. Okay, folks, thanks very much. Until later.